is revealing something critical here. When the Bible speaks about being, it is not talking about personality or ego or self-image the way we use those words today. It is revealing. Source.in the original Hebrew, this phrase comes from the verb haya, which means to exist, to remain, to be established. God is saying, I exist by myself. I am not caused. I do not depend on anything else to be who I am. Everything else exists because of me, but I exist because I am. That means authority does not come from action. Action flows from being. This is why Scripture later says, in Him we live and move and have our being. Notice the order. Live, move, being. Movement flows out of being. Action flows out of being. Authority flows out of being. Now look at creation. When God creates man in Genesis, He does not start with tasks. He does not start with work. He says, let us make man in our image. Image means representation, expression, reflection. Humanity was designed to operate from being, not performance. Before man ever worked, he belonged. Before man ever acted, he reflected. Before man ever ruled, he carried identity. Effort was never meant to define man. Circumstances were never meant to shape him. Striving was never meant to govern him. Being came first. This explains why so many people feel heavy inside. When your being is unsettled, everything you do feels exhausting. You try harder. You push more. You force outcomes. But when being is settled, action becomes clean. The pressure disappears. Not because life is easy, but because you are anchored. This is the foundation. Miss this and everything else becomes strain. Now let's bring this directly to your life. If someone asks you who you are, most people answer with doing. I am a student. I am a business owner. I work here. I am trying to build something. Notice what is happening. Identity gets tied to function, productivity, and results. And the moment identity is tied to doing, being becomes unstable. Because what happens when the job changes? What happens when the business slows down? What happens when the role ends? If identity lives in doing, then identity rises and falls with circumstances. That is why people feel confident one season and insecure the next. Grounded one moment and lost the next. Not because they lack faith, but because their being has no anchor. When God says, I am, He is saying, my identity is not dependent on outcomes. My authority is not borrowed from results. My being does not fluctuate with conditions. So how do you live from being instead of effort? Scripture gives a clear pattern. There are 3 movements. If you skip one, the next will not work. Step 1. Stop answering life from doing. Most pressure does not come from circumstances. It comes from how we answer them. When pressure rises, the instinct is automatic. Do more. Fix faster. So are we in this world. That means your position is not something you work toward. It is something you stand from. When identity is unclear, every decision feels urgent. You rush conversations. You over-explain. You overcorrect. You say yes when you should wait. Not because you lack wisdom, but because you are answering life from insecurity instead of identity. When you begin from being, the question changes. It is no longer, what do I need to do? It becomes, who am I and what flows from that? This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You still act, but you stop negotiating your worth through outcomes. That is why Scripture says, the righteous are bold as a lion. Boldness does not come from confidence in results. It comes from settled identity. Once being is anchored, pressure loses its ability to rush you. Circumstances lose their power to define you. This is the first shift. And without it, every other step becomes exhausting. Step 2. Settle being before you move. This is where most people lose power. Not because they do not believe, but because they move too soon. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency pushes action. Action happens before the inner world is settled. And when movement comes before settlement, everything feels heavy. Scripture reverses this order. Those who believe enter rest. Rest is not laziness. Rest is the end of inner conflict. It means the decision is made inwardly before it is acted on outwardly. No more arguing with fear. No more rehearsing outcomes. This is why Jesus went to the garden. Nothing external had changed. The cross was still coming. The pain was still real, but something settled inside. After that, there was no scrambling, no defending, no explaining. Settlement gives weight to movement. Words spoken after settlement carry authority. Silence after settlement carries strength. Actions after settlement are clean, not rushed. This is the difference between motion and momentum. Motion comes from pressure. Momentum comes from settled being. When you act before settling, your actions try to compensate for uncertainty. When you act after settling, your actions simply express what is already decided. If you skip settlement, movement costs peace. If you settle first, movement costs nothing extra. This is not delay. This is depth. Step 3. Let action flow, not force. Once being is aligned, action does not need to be.